Guys, Intel's Coffee Lake CPUs are finally here, and over the last few days I've had the pleasure of getting familiar with the new 6-core i5-8600K, and if you want to check that out, I'll include a link to it at the end of this video, but none of that would have been possible without a powerful Z370 motherboard. The new MSI Gaming M5 fits that job very well, and today we're going to be taking a closer look at it, from features, design, and of course overclocking. I don't have the US pricing confirmed just yet, but here in Australia, it's on the shelf for $339. I'll update you guys as soon as I can on US pricing down below in the comments section. Now, Z370 is the first chipset to be compatible with Intel's new quad-core and 6-core Coffee Lake CPUs, with full overclocking capability for their unlocked processors, and also a premium list of features. Those who aren't interested in overclocking and wanted a cheaper CPU and motherboard combo will have to wait until early 2018 when the B360 and H310 chipsets are released. Until then, let's take a look at what we're working with here. Now, a quick applause to MSI for a neutral colored board. I know their usual black and red color scheme must have been pretty tempting, but here the gunmetal and black looks very clean indeed, and is exactly what the community wants. I also respect that the branding is blacked out and the RGB lighting is pretty minimal, but I'm sure some of you may prefer it that way, with full control through Mystic Sync with RGB on the bottom left and also on the PCH heatsink on the bottom right. The RAM DIMMs include MSI's patent-pending steel armor, which adds extra ground points onto the board and claims to reduce electromagnetic interference and therefore clean up the data signals for the memory. I can't confirm these claims just yet, but at the very least it does add a nice touch to the design. We're also getting support for up to 64GB across the 4 memory slots, with XMP allowing for speeds over 4000 MHz. Also, for multi-GPU users out there, we do have support for up to 3-way SLI and 2-way Crossfire as well, and the PCI Express slots 1 and 4, which most of you will be using for your graphics cards, are reinforced, which is always a pleasure to see. Now, this doesn't necessarily reduce the sag that you get with heavy graphics cards, but it should improve the overall stability and endurance of the slot itself. 6 Sata ports are easily accessible at a right angle, making for an easy connection, and MSI have decided to drop the U.2 connection, which was otherwise featured on the previous generation of this board. Not a big deal in my opinion, but of course still worth mentioning. We're also getting support for 2 M.2 drives, one above the top expansion slot here, which accommodates up to 110mm, and the other next to slot 5, which supports up to 80mm and also includes their M.2 shield. Now, some of you guys will know that the M.2 shields on the Z370 boards were pretty poorly designed and actually increased the temperatures of the M.2 SSDs under load. This time around though, the thermal pad on the M.2 shield is significantly thicker, which should improve heat dissipation. I'll be doing some testing on this in the near future though, so make sure you're subscribed if you don't want to miss that. We're working with the usual ports when it comes to rear I/O, gigabit LAN, HD audio, but more importantly USB 3.1 Type A in both Gen 1 and 2, and also Gen 2 Type C, which I'm sure some of you can appreciate. MSI's BIOS is clean and most of you will prefer this simpler design. The menu system is solid and enabling the essentials like XMP profiles are made really easy. Something else I appreciate on this board is that the clear CMOS button is located right next to the rear I/O. There's nothing more annoying than having to dig through a user manual just to find which header pins will clear the CMOS. Now let's get to overclocking, and I'll only touch on this briefly here because I did go quite in depth with my overclocking results in my 8600K review. But overall, the Z370 Gaming M5 handles overclocking exactly as you would expect from an enthusiast level board. Now, we don't have an insane number of VRM phases or anything over the top in terms of power delivery, but it was more than enough to overclock the i5-8600K up to a monstrous 5.3 GHz. Even I couldn't believe my eyes when the system actually booted at that frequency, let alone completed several Cinebench runs and extensive AIDA64 stability testing. So using the offset mode in the BIOS, I was able to get 5 GHz stable at 1.2 volts, 5.1 GHz stable at 1.28 volts, 5.2 GHz stable at 1.32 volts, and finally 5.3 GHz stable at 1.38 volts. I was also happy to see that out of the box, the motherboard wasn't feeding the CPU too much power either. With everything set to auto, the 8600K boosted up to 4.3 GHz and sat quite happily between 1.15 and 1.2 volts. With a 240mm liquid all-in-one cooler, I didn't see temperatures above 55 C with ambient temperatures at 23 degrees C. Of course, this was at stock, and once overclocked, we see that go up to about 70 to 75. Enabling Game Boost in the BIOS will give you a slight overclock of 200 MHz, and for those who just want a little bit more performance without doing any tinkering, this seems like an okay solution, but is fairly conservative in my opinion. With Coffee Lake being capable of so much more, the mere 200 MHz from Game Boost seems like nothing compared to what you're able to achieve with a manual overclock. And so the Z370 Gaming M5 from MSI proves itself again in the Z370 market. And I know a lot of you guys will have your eyes on this one, seeing as it was a fairly popular choice for previous generation. Most of you guys probably won't be able to leverage the full feature list of the more expensive Z370 boards, and trust me guys, there are plenty of those. And so the Gaming M5 really hits that sweet spot in the Z370 stack, where users are able to utilize the majority of features. I'll have pricing listed down below, as well as a selection of Coffee Lake CPUs for you guys to check out. I've got tons of content lined up for this new chipset guys, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see similar content like this. Thanks so much for watching guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.